a lot of organizations aren't even thinking about this question, number one. So if you're listening today and you're wondering what you just said, you need to think about this, right? You need to be understanding, is the brand of the company being embodied in the hiring process? I think a lot of people are doing it well, but I think a lot of people aren't.
You are listening to Frog Talk, presented by Black Ribbon.
We will begin today's episode by focusing on how culture in the workplace has broken over the last few years, and especially in a post-COVID environment. We want to talk about how can leadership realign workforce culture and motivation. So thinking about how communications and branding can affect the modern workplace, as it were, thinking about hybrid models, working from home, working in the office exclusively or otherwise. You both have experience working for companies and clients, and also leading your own teams. So what is your experience with the reduction in engagement, employee engagement, and does it relate to communications?
I'll start. Good to see you. Thanks for having me on, Nader, on the podcast. I'm glad you're here for the first episode. This is a big topic, and I'll start by saying, yes, I agree with you. I think engagement has dipped when you look back 2020 and beyond to now, and I almost think there's a couple different seasons of that. We had our quiet quitting window, which isn't completely a thing now, it seems. However, I'm hearing it come back up when I talk to people that are in the agency world across the board, talking about, should I quiet quit? And the reaction to that is very interesting to me, because I always think, why are you quiet quitting? Why not just quit? And there's this tension I think people have, that they are not getting what they need from leadership. That's ultimately what I see when I've talked to people that are in that experience. And also being a leader as well, none of us are perfect. I try to create really the best teams I can and really try to pay attention and listen. And it's hard work. Being a manager is hard work. And when I think about the ones that aren't really in tune with their team, I think that's where the breakdown starts to happen, because you have to sort of understand where they are and almost get inside of your employees' heads to understand why they're checking out, because they rarely tell us, I'm done, I'm quiet quitting, I'm not here anymore. You have to start to be perceptive and see that it's happening. So I think it's a big problem. And I think it's really rooted in the lack of communication, and also the lack of empathy and understanding from the leadership what the people want and why they're checking out. They're not asking in many cases. And I think that's a problem.
Bruce, any thought?
Well, I agree with you both, and also I wanted to add that I think that one of the things that hurt many industries, it was that since COVID and the whole seclusion of ourselves and at home, not many industries were ready for that, and we tried to translate day-to-day work, office work, into the framing of a video call, and the thing about it is that the attention span that we have reduced over the years due to social media engagement is really something that was not thought of at the beginning, and and this is why I also agree that a lot of people are just quiet quitting and they're just disengaging, because it's still being associated with screen time. It's not being considered, a physical presence. And you can tell the difference when you meet a client nowadays and you spend 30 minutes with them. It really does not translate the same as having a video, meeting, a status meeting that's 30 minutes long. It just doesn't translate as well. And a lot of people felt isolated working from home. Others were just, thriving on it. And we're still learning on the outcomes and the results from that. But I think one of the things that I personally noticed, because it happened to me, I try to maintain the same work style with my team as if it was, us coming into the office every day. And it wasn't the same. And I think that now that we've learned, and we are now more engaged in how they feel, if they feel, safe about their health, their job security, and that's where we can feel that they're going to be more engaged, because uncertainty and the fear that comes from it is what really hurt many industries over the past years.
Yeah, man, we just covered a lot there. So you both brought up a lot of really good points. I want to be able to touch on a few of them in particular. Joey, you talked about getting in the minds of your team and really understanding where they're coming from and their position in sort of the organization, as it were, as a whole. And Chris, you talked about something in particular that stood out to me, which was about burnout and screen time and how that has sort of affected this feeling of isolation, in terms of being alone when you work from home versus working in the office. I want to sort of combine the 2 points into a single question. How do you think, because I have my own opinions about this. So, do you think the generational gap is real? And how do you think the generational gap is affecting what you guys just talked about? So the notion of requiring more empathy with your team, or a more sort of compassionate, understanded approach towards your team, and how do those generational gaps affect this feeling of isolation and the necessity for being around more people, or the lack of necessity, for being more, for needing to be more, for needing to be around more people, if that makes sense. So I'll let Joey respond first.
Sure. Yes, that's a great point. And as you were talking, I was thinking about this, just with people I know, whether people I've managed and also friends and colleagues. And I don't think it's completely connected always to that generation. I think the stereotypes exist for a reason between millennials and Gen Z, and we put them in buckets in our marketing and branding world. Though I think when you dig within it, there are different kinds of people within each of those communities. And what I find to be interesting, I actually have a friend who works in a job, and he was actually telling me recently that he wanted more FaceTime with his manager, and he wanted FaceTime that was more quality and less reactive, which I thought was
Mhm.
very interesting. Now, he fits in the millennial category. And that stood out to me because when I asked him about his role, it really, and he's not in a creative space. And so he just basically said, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going days without knowing what's happening. And in turn, he's craving more collaboration, which is interesting because a lot of people say millennials don't want that. And then obviously, well, not obviously, for me, obviously, working with Gen Z, when I look in that group of people, I do think in general the data rings true that it is a much more collaborative generation. And I think when I when I was working at an agency during COVID, I run my own business now, but during the COVID window, I was working as a leader in an agency. We onboarded Gen Z staff during that window, and they actually really thrived in the Zoom community because we had so many conversations and calls, but what they really reacted to was being part of the various channels, Slack, being plugged into different collaborative tools. That's something I really noticed in that particular group of people, like newer hires that were a couple years out of school, right? So those are some observations that I think are true. So I don't think it's specifically rooted in the exact generation always. I think we have to listen to each person and understand where they're coming from. I'll just share one question I often ask people that work with me. I always ask them when they start, or even every couple months, why are you here? Like, why are you choosing to stay at this job? And it's a very funny thing because a lot of staff would look at me and think, you're talking about me, the prospect of me not being here. And I said, yeah, you don't own this company. I don't own this company. Let's be real about it. And that really disarmed them to share, I'm not getting what I need. I'm not getting what I need. I'm not fulfilled. I need you to help me get a new opportunity or whatever that is within the job or I'm leaving, right? So I just thought I would share that because if you're bold enough to say something like that, it can really disarm your staff and understand what they really need.
I have a similar example, but I'll let Chris respond to that first.
And in my experience, I have noticed that generationally speaking, the age gap does affect. And I was thinking of how we grew up, with technology, the technology that we were working with, the ones that we were exposed to, our childhoods. people, me, by saying me, I mean people over 40, were not as affected by either social media, online gaming, or just the use of a phone in general. So it's very often that people from 40 years and over, that they are quite comfortable in waiting for promotions, in waiting for rewards and recognition. Whereas in the case of people from a much younger generation, late millennials and Gen Z, uh, people are usually expecting rewards and recognitions faster, a faster promotion, and that also affects with their engagement, because if they don't see it, they think that they're not going anywhere, because they haven't gotten promoted to east side supervisor. uh, that they feel that their work and their place on that company is not going to reach a certain level, so they just quit, and they're really disattached from any commitment. And that also is something that people, in my case, as a business owner, and many other companies should take into account. There is a high rotation of Gen Z workers, because they simply see an opportunity and they take it, what they consider is going to be beneficial for them. So it's not in the best interest of the company, it's more in the what's going to be good for me. And it does affect, you see a difference in the
Yeah,
age gap.
absolutely. And again, really good points from both of you. There was a lot to touch on there. I see. So there was a recent, from my experience, experientially, I've noticed that Gen Z's actually, a lot of Gen Z's, people in their 20s, especially like mid on the latter side of the generation, crave to work in the office actually. The ones who have been, because they've been experiencing working from home already, their school was interrupted during COVID and so on, and they actually crave to work in the office, because they need that collaboration. They need that sort of intimate feel, and that creative environment that we've all experienced, that we've been talking about, to the point where working from home for Gen Y and Gen X has actually been easier, because we've learned the processes in the office. We've learned what the collaborative nature looks like. We've understood the communication barriers and what's required to get our voices heard. Whereas something like what Joey said earlier, just ironically, the status quo believes that Gen Z has a firm grasp of technology across the board. That's just not true. They are masters of the internet and masters of social media and how to navigate that side of communications and even marketing. But when it comes to like inner office tools, PM tools, ERPs, it's just way over their head, and it's because they don't have the experience. And when they're not in the workspace, in the office, actually practicing those tools and so on within the workforce, learning that stuff at home through remote instructions and so on is just a lot more challenging. And we don't realize it, because we came up with inner office PM tools when they started coming out 10, 15, 20 years ago, and then some. And moreover, to Joy's earlier point, it really resonated with me when you asked about when you mentioned your notion of asking, why are you even here? Why are you here? Why do you want to work here? I The example that I wanted to share with that was that in the interview process, bringing it all back to branding and communications, and how do you express the values of your workforce and your company and your organization right from the get-go, so that the whether it's the interviewee or some candidate or even partners or prospects or whatever, understand who you are as an organization, what you believe in, why you are who you are, and so on, why anybody should care. um, right there in that conversation, in the interview, that question should arise, right? That should be, what do you what do you want to get out of this job? And in ways, in a very specific sequence of questions that leads them down to not the standard, where do you see yourself in 3 years, but if 3 years from now and you're really happy with what's been going down, for the last 3 years. What's happened to make you so happy? And then you just go backwards from there to the point where now together you can already start curating their journey in the interview. And if they can envision that and you can envision that together, so you're saying, how can we help you get there in 3 years? So now already you're giving the interviewee ownership of their position in the company. And to Chris's point, they're now able to see this sort of path, this career path, this rising up the ladder kind of a model, and inherently start thinking about growth with the company, some sort of advocacy or loyalty, because right from the get-go, you're thinking about it in those terms. Um, and so that leads me, unless you have something to add to that, that leads me to just asking about how do you guys usually implement yourselves in your teams and your groups, or even recommend to your clients on how to implement the company's brand values and brand vision and mission and so on, narrative into your employee engagement programs, and even to the point of engaging recruits right from the get-go.
Huh. You're calling on me like a teacher. Hey, I'm ready. I was thinking about that. It's a big question. It's a big question. You have a lot of big questions today. I love it. I think a lot of organizations aren't even thinking about this question, number one. So if you're listening today and you're wondering what you just said, you need to think about this, right? You need to be understanding, is the brand of the company being embodied in the hiring process? I think a lot of people are doing it well, but I think a lot of people aren't. So that's number one, just being intentional about that, to understand how would someone describe the company from our viewpoint. Is it fun? Is it serious? Is it rigid? Give us some words, like we would in a branding project. All of us work in the space. I think that's great because, as creatives on the call, we need those to understand how to build something out. And actually, I think even non-visual people also respond to these kinds of words. So that's the first thing I would think of, is like, what do we want this company to feel like? How does it sound? And then therefore we build that into the process itself. And it's even a good check for us as managers coming in each day. Collaborative is a great word. So every agency that I've worked at, it either has been collaborative or I've been the one fighting for collaboration. So I'll start there. I'm the one trying to instill more collaboration in the brand of the company, and everything I do now on my own watch is collaborative. That's a word that I feel strongly about. So how do you weave that in, right? And so I think that's number one. Are you bringing multiple people into the job interview? Step one. Are you interviewing just with the manager, the CEO? Is it the sense that the CEO has the final say? Or is it the sense that, no, the peers that come in actually have a voice? That could be a first place. If that's coming across weird in the interview process, you need to run away as a job applicant, because they're saying collaboration, but it's not being embodied in the process. So that's one example. I could give more, but I think that's an easy one for people to understand, because most people want their companies to be collaborative. So build it in and make it real. And here's the thing: if it's not built into your process now, start it. It doesn't have to be perfect in the beginning, but be intentional about building those words into the process, and you're going to get better with each job interview. But don't just sleep on it. We need to be thinking about these things. Does that answer the question, Adair? Was there anything else
It
you wanted
does.
me to
It
touch on
does.
there?
Thank you,
That's how I've
Joey.
done it
And
in terms
I
of
just want to add
branding and then embodying it in
sort
the
of a
process itself.
complementary statement that the length of the interview process is critical as well. A lot of organizations are losing top talent because they're playing well, we're not sure yet, let's see, kind of a game, and passing them between other staff members, other managers, and so on, to the point where who is the final decision maker? That's a great question. Why do I have to talk to 7 people before I actually get to the final decision maker? Do they have any influence on it anyway? And I think if we optimize the interview process and the interview itself, that first meeting, we can, the interview process can be reduced down to a matter of a couple weeks instead of 6-week turnaround to decide what's going on. And in the meantime, top talent, really good people are getting other offers, and they're bouncing because they're like, this is just taking too long. Chris, what do you think about all that?
I think that that's why when you're talking and working on a company's branding, it should definitely go above and beyond just a logo and, you know, how it looks, the colors that you're going to be using, because the brand itself has to be integrated into every single one of the processes. The way somebody answers the phone, the way they sign the emails, even in the acquisition of talent, you have to be able to know if that person is a match for your brand. I mean, even if they have the skills, you should definitely know that if their personality is the one that you want to work with. I mean, I could hire somebody that's very creative, but if that person is just annoying to work with, or just plain hateful, and I mean, the skills might be there, but there's also a lot of people involved in the process, and there's a harmony behind it. And this is why it's most likely that your group of friends are going to resemble you, because it's hard to not, to stay in groups when one person stands out, like a stain in a on a wall. It's and this is something that should be encapsulated into the whole branding process, which is why it takes longer for many companies, because, like you mentioned, maybe the CEO wasn't aware of how things should work on that area. Maybe they have an idea of what they want, but that doesn't translate to the brand being what
Yeah.
the brand needs. And I
Absolutely.
agree with
And the
what you said.
chemistry thing is huge too. I myself, my entire process of interviews is surrounding chemistry, because you can always teach skills. I would rather somebody, for example, our Black Ribbit's top, like, overarching value is reliability. We even say reliability above all else. We have 3 points. It's reliability, decisiveness, and compassion. So reliability is above all else. And if I can narrow down and support the notion that the person I'm speaking to, including clients, I mean, people who are communicative and respond and responsive, and I've even been asked, "What do you mean when you say reliable?" And I say, "Doing what you say you're going to do." That's what I mean. If you say something and do something else, then I can't trust you. So that's the only thing that this organization requires. The rest you can learn. And if that value it resonates and we can see eye to eye on that, the rest follows. And it's amazing how quickly you can narrow that field down just by asking the top level pertinent brand value, organizational importances within that narrative. Uh, so, how do you guys think, or how have you felt the financial impact of this sort of disengagement? As we all know, there's been a lot of turnover. Um, Forget layoffs, just people coming in and then leaving, coming in for a month or two and then leaving. And speaking of generational gaps, there was a study recently that Gen Z apparently, it's almost like dating. They apply to jobs, they might even get the interview, and then they ghost the company, or they apply to a job, they get a call back, but they ghost it. And this, according to the study, which unfortunately I can't reference because I don't remember exactly the name of it, but I'll share it with you guys later, is claims that they feel a sense of ownership, like they're in control. It gives them a sense of control in being able to do this. So how do you think these kinds of events, these kinds of behaviors affect the organization financially, and what kind of repercussions are experienced in that capacity?
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a thought there. If I can jump in, two pronged. One, I'll come back to my original point in the beginning, because I'm hearing you speak and I'm thinking about a lot of types of companies and in different situations. Uh, Back to what motivates that employee, because you are right. There is this feeling that the younger quote generation, Gen Z, coming out of school, many are doing what you described, and I think people that like ourselves that aren't in that generation there can be a sense of judgment. I'm not saying we're doing that on this interview, but I've heard this sense of judgment toward that behavior, that it's all bad, it's nothing's good about it, like not seeking to understand where they're coming from. And as we know, with conflict resolution, it's not going to go anywhere. So I really am curious to understand why they're thinking that way. What will engage them is the question that I would ask. What does engagement look like for this person that's job hopping? And honestly, when I have hired people, but obviously I'm coming from the creative agency background, like you just referenced, Nadir, with Black Ribbit as well. So us hiring talent, obviously we're hiring creative people for most jobs. And so there's this feeling of like they want to be more invested in the job, but that's not even something we should presume going into this with this new post-COVID world, because there are some people that I know that are really smart, creative people that don't want to give their entire brain power to the job. They don't. They want to bring creative inspiration to the table, but they want to leave and go on hikes on the weekend, and they want to go surfing. They don't want to pour all of their passions like I think we did coming up through our grind, our agency grind. Chris, you said this, we proved ourselves. They don't care. It doesn't resonate. It doesn't matter. And so my thought is, well, how can we engage them? How can I get your 40 hours to be really good? Really good. Let me get you for 40. And then realizing that, like you said, when you were talking about the hiring process, about that long thing, well, maybe we need as employers, we need to think about this job's a more short-term job. This person's not going to be here for more than 3 years because of the nature of it. So let's not invest so much grooming in the process. Let's make sure they're a good fit, but let's not try to think of it as a marriage where they're going to be there forever. And, one thing I'll say finally, when I was hiring a large team a couple of years ago around about the COVID timeframe, I was in a larger agency. I would hire people on the team based on their sensibilities. So, for example, some people would be high-end creative people pushing the status quo because that was part of the brand. Then there were these other people that were hired in the sensibility of not challenging the status quo, because we kind of need both. Because if everyone's like me coming in trying to blow everything up and start new, it doesn't work. You need people that will hold some stability. So I would hire in that spirit to build out a team without announcing it in so many words. It's not like your job's different than their job. It's more the functions of the job are the same, but the soft skills we're looking for are different. I'm looking for a different temperament between those two people. Does that make sense in terms of balancing it out? And that worked really well because it creates a collaborative environment where you don't have
Right.
everyone being the same. It's not homogenous.
And I don't think it does make sense. And I
Yeah.
love that input. I don't think the goal is to have everyone be the same anyway. I think what the sameness, just like in any brand strategy, needs to come from the place of value, is that your values are shared. But as far as what you personally care about and how you bring that not compassion, that passion into the work is going to be different. And that's how creativity thrives anyway, right? Is that we combine our differences in order to create these awesome things. But to your point, we need to be very mindful of that and be able to identify those differences, to be able to nurture those in a way that makes sense for those individuals. And again, to your point, none of this is trivial. It requires a lot of question, communication, and openness across the board in order to understand those points that actually nurture those differences.
Yeah, I think that Joey mentioned something. Uh, is the job position going to be something that's going to be sticking there for for the long period of time? I think building up on that, I think that one of the things that affects the engagement and people remaining within the workplace is that there's from companies, and this is from the employer side, and this is something that I'm thinking about right now because I've done it. There's not a full disclosure of what the job will lead to in the future, in the sense that we're just hiring people to perform certain tasks and complete uh, job descriptions, and but I don't think that we're offering them a chance to envision what it could be like on the long run. For example, if somebody wants to take over for me and just manage my company, I'm in. I mean, I would gladly step down. Uh, and that is something that and on occasion I have told people that work with me that there is a chance to grow within the company. It's up to them if they eventually want to become the general manager, the owner. Even, I mean, why shouldn't I? Why should I stop them from doing that? And this is again going back to people who want a reward earlier than others. If they don't, and like you said, it's much like a dating app. They just apply for many positions and then end up ghosting the companies. But it's also, I think that it's because we're not fully disclosing what they can achieve. We're just you know offering them a salary and the gift of seeing our faces every day. And I don't think that's enough anymore. uh, but again, it has created an impact that, because everything was so unstable a couple of years ago with the pandemic, each man, each person for his own. It was save yourselves and do whatever it takes to do so. And that mentality, unfortunately, is still sticking to this day among some of our peers. And I guess that in order to stop that, companies must also offer, something beyond just the position that
the
they're
and the
hiring people
paycheck.
for.
And you just said something that's an incredible segue
Yeah.
into our next episode, is because the it's this notion that I've coined, and we have experience with each other. I think you've both heard it. It's one thing that was really good that came out of COVID was the notion of self-care, to take care of oneself, to be mindful of your own mental health and your own stresses and your environment and how that affects your overall productivity and so on. And the notion that, take care of yourself so you can take care of others. But in true American fashion, what we always do in this side of the world is we push every concept to the extreme. And so we push this one well off the edge of the cliff too, and self-care became selfish care. So now we're talking about the what exactly what you said, Chris. Like, the collective is no longer part of the picture. It's about me, the employee, me, the new hire, me, the contractor. What if you say one thing that pisses me off? I'm out. If you can't match what I'm asking for, I'm out. If you can't do this, I'm out. But that's also to say, I'm not at all blaming anybody here. The point is, there needs to be a mutual ground that reignites the notion of the collective and the importance of the collective, that we need you as much as you need us. And there is this two-way street, because without you, we can't do what we're trying to do. And without us, you can't do what you're trying to do. At the end of the day, there is an infrastructure. Those of us who want to be independent can only do so by relying on an infrastructure. We can't do it otherwise. There's a word for that. It's called anarchy. If you do that, that means a complete breakdown across the board in infrastructure. And if we go back to the woods, guess what happens? We're going to rely on nature to feed us, and finally get back to relying on each other to support each other so that we can survive out in nature. Anyway, the collective is required. And I think it is up to employers and organizations to really understand and dig into what we've been talking about this entire time. The things that the motives that drive us. Whether it's, I don't want to work past 40 hours a week. I do want my breaks. I do value my time off. But at the same time, establish the fact that you're also important to me. The organization is important to me. The notion of work to live and live to work is just gone. It's neither this nor that. It's part of each other. Work is part of life, and life is part of work. So how do we create an environment that sort of brings these two together, to where there is this harmonious sort of balance between employer and employee, to where we're talking beyond the paycheck. We're not just talking about a paycheck. Why should anyone care if they're only getting paid? Especially when, and when I say anyone, okay, there are people who go after the money, but those people, they work their asses off because that's all they're after. So they're not really what we're talking about. We're talking about, your creatives, your admins, your HRs, your even your IT people, your tech people, your programmers, and so on. And we need to create an environment where we're pushing beyond the paycheck. And we all know this. You get a raise, and in 3 months you're like, shit, I'm still here. Like that, the high goes away really quickly. I mean, you get a big pay bump and you're cool for a minute, and then the job is basically still the same. The environment is the same. The people are the same. So I want to we are coming towards the end here, so I want to make sure we cover the points that we've all been talking about, and sort of wrap up in a way that we can discuss what examples of positive transformation and impactful transformation have you guys seen or implemented? And please feel free to comment on what I was just saying with respect to this workplace based on what you guys were just saying. So what are the sort of examples, good examples and positive examples you guys have experienced and possibly implemented yourself with your own teams or with your clients' teams to really sort of adopt these not new, but these methods that we're talking about in terms of bringing in the culture and the brand narrative into the workplace and into the employee engagement programs?
I don't know. Yeah, I'll go first. I think that I had the privilege of working during COVID. It wasn't my own agency at that time. I was working for an agency. I was a senior leader in the agency, so I had a lot of input. We did a really great job during COVID, if I have to be honest, in terms of almost going overboard and giving people time codes to build towards self-care and extended leave, just really, really generous things to really support the process. We did Zoom coffees constantly. Just a lot of what you would call in the agency world unbillable time was relaxed. And that was really big for people because it was valuable. Now, the challenge is how you get out of that. So now, fast forward to 3 years later, billable time's back. Now, I'm not speaking specifically about that agency, but it is true. It never went away. It was more, everyone just realized the world feels like it's collapsing. So we have to figure something out and make people like be present right at work. And so I think that is big though. And when I look at how we did that, I think it was more just being intentional about those programs and figuring out a way to pay for them, figuring out how to make it not, the most important thing is to make it not seen as negative or bad if people do need work-life balance. I think that was the key difference there. It was more the intention. It didn't feel like it was this trick where you have a code, but you're going to be frowned upon if you use it.
Mm-hmm.
Not to get in this whole conversation, but it's sort of the concept of unlimited vacation. Everyone that works at an agency that has that hates it. Not everyone. Everyone I talk to hates it because they don't understand when it's done. We need limits. There's no limits. So they work all the time. They don't take time off because it feels like you never can take a day off because you have unlimited vacation. So you really have no vacation. So that's kind of the trick, right? So I think that like unclear expectation is the problem. It's just, you need to be clear about what it is and what it isn't. So I think that's a couple examples of how we built that in, but it's intentional. It's to sit down and say, we have to change something. Mm-hmm. How might we do that? And then figuring out ways to do it. If it's collaboration, bring people together. If it's more money, try to find a way to pay them more money, or at least, to your point, Chris, put them on a path so they earn the money, they progress and actually get there. But I think clarity is very much key, like you said, Chris, as well. Helping them understand what the trajectory is and how they get there. And also when they've timed out at the agency, when they've reached a ceiling, and it's just being honest about that, this job does not go any higher. And then maybe it is time for them to transition and find a new job. I think being honest about those things is really important.
Absolutely. I think that is also, like you mentioned there, it's culture, company culture. It is, culture in itself is collaborative in the sense that you can create a brand for, and a feeling of what the company is like from within, but you also have to take in a lot of from, what the people are getting out of it. I've noticed that a lot of tech companies, because of their work format and the fact that a lot of the people that are working there just have to spend insane amounts of hours coding and testing, that they, offer, like games within the, or special sections within a building for them to relax. It's not so much about the commodities that they get. It's the fact that they are sharing with the world what they do with their talent. And I've noticed that it's interesting because once people know about those perks and benefits, only the, the best talent starts wanting to work there because they see themselves working at a place where they offer, like X amount of time on maternity leaves, or, a room where they can just put on their headphones and code in silence, or just all of those things. And I think that once you start portraying that culture and exposing it to the world, a lot of people start applying. And then HR has a picnic because they can just select the best out of everyone that's just, reaching the doors and trying to stampede over to the to the company. The culture is something that its essence should not be something that's changeable over time, but it must be adapting to the necessities because, as we noticed, and where everything sparked off in this conversation, there was a situation, a world situation, a global phenomenon that sparked a numerous amounts of changes that we are, to this day, a lot of us are still paying for it. So even if our essence remains the same, we should be mindful of what, of this past experience and be open to change and adaptation. Same as I hear this comment, AI is going to take over uh, uh, videographers or creative people's work. It might take away some tasks. I think the process in itself, it's still human. It's human imitation that AI is trying to replicate. We are still the essence, but it did not jump in out of thin air. It was created by a necessity because a lot of people were not performing. A lot of people were not doing things fast enough. So stakeholders and investors, I mean, they need they also need to see results. So I think that being open to change is crucial to growth, to growing your company, your brand, to making employees happier, to gain your partners. Even if you want to, I mean, you have to think, and you mentioned this, Nader, I mean, think of your company as if you
Mm.
were going to sell it in the future, even if you don't want to, but make it so attractive from within that people are asking, hey, so what's the price point on your
Yeah.
company right now?
Yeah.
Uh, and everything is
Yeah,
encapsulated in
I
that
agree.
culture.
And also really well said. I think, and that's something that we do here at Black Rivet as well. I think companies who are employing what we call an inside outside in model, where they're essentially aligning their company vision with their customer value proposition and then tying it back to their employee value proposition, are really the ones that are seeing the success and are able to portray and express the internal culture externally as well, to start attracting not just customers, but people who are just craving to work at these organizations. And so that way you're creating this holistic beef up of the entire program and just consistently adding value.